I'm Clara Williams, and at 32, I wasn't chasing wealth or recognition. I just wanted to be seen by my own family. For years, I lived with the ache of being the forgotten daughter, the quiet one who never fit the mold. Then 6 years ago, my grandfather passed away. I thought I'd missed his funeral. Until I found out the truth, they lied to keep me away. Last month, I walked into my childhood home for the reading of his will. My parents and sister didn't know I was coming. When the lawyer read Grandpa's letter out loud, everything unraveled. Lies, betrayal, erasure, all exposed in one afternoon. That was the day I stopped being invisible. Before I share the full story, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, hit like and subscribe. This one's for you. To truly understand what unfolded that day, we have to go back a bit. My family, well, we were complicated. Or maybe I was the complicated one. From what I can gather now, looking back, it seems I never quite fit into the mold my parents, Brenda and James, had prepared for their daughters. My older sister, Victoria, she was the epitome of what they wanted. She was outgoing, charming, always sparkling in all the ways they understood. She played the part they handed her perfectly. She was the chosen one, the performer. I, on the other hand, was always the quiet one, the observer, the thinker. I was the kid who asked why, when everyone else just accepted things. When they didn't even care to ask. My grandfather, Walter, he saw that in me. He saw how I'd clutched that little notebook when I was 7, obsessively tracking how long it took raindrops to fill a glass. He saw how my face would light up when I discovered patterns, when everyone else just saw distractions. But my parents, they didn't see it. Or maybe they chose not to. I remember the way my joy would dim every time my mother, Brenda, would brush me off, dismissing my latest scientific discovery or observation as childish nonsense. I remember my father, James, changing the subject every single time I tried to share something I was genuinely proud of, something I'd poured my heart into. It was like they couldn't translate my language, the language of curiosity and discovery. And instead of trying to learn it, instead of trying to understand me, they just shut me out. It wasn't just emotional neglect, it was practical too. My parents were constantly pushing me to be more like your sister. Victoria, for her part, always seemed to turn my small triumphs into some kind of threat. If I excelled at something, she'd scoff or make a dismissive comment, implying I was just trying to steal her thunder. They groomed her, Victoria, to be the public face of the family, the one who would carry on their perceived legacy of social graces and business acumen. And for years, she bought into it. She visited Grandpa when it was convenient, smiled when she was told to, and said the right things, because she genuinely thought it would pay off. She believed she was the good daughter, the one who stayed. She worked for what she got, as she liked to put it. But I saw it for what it was, even then, deep down. A transaction, not genuine connection. My escape, my lifeline, was my grandfather. He believed in me. He funded my education, every single cent of it. He found scholarships for me, paid for my lab camps, my travel, even the scientific journals I mailed him from college. My parents didn't even know where I went half the time. They made me feel like a burden, like my very existence was an inconvenience. But Grandpa, he made me feel seen. He nurtured my passion for science, never laughing when I told him I wanted to study plant memory. He saw me, Clara, for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. He recognized that I was building my own truth in a family that had no idea how to honor it. He even helped me arrange glow-in-the-dark stars on my childhood bedroom ceiling in scientifically accurate constellations when I was 9, never questioning it. He knew I was never a mistake. I was the legacy he was proudest of. My life with them felt like I was constantly trying to earn their love, their approval. It was a silent contract I lived by. If I proved myself enough, if I achieved enough, if I stayed useful, maybe, just maybe, they would finally call me daughter, sister, family, without flinching. But their indifference was a constant dull ache. I remember winning my first science fair, a small local competition. I was so proud. But when I got home, I asked Grandpa to help me hide the trophy. I told him, maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I'm someone else's child. My mother didn't even come to the fair. She was at Victoria's dress rehearsal. I just wanted to be invisible, to disappear from their critical gaze. My parents believed I was too busy, that I didn't want to be bothered. that I had a new life. They told my grandmother that I had changed my number, that I didn't want to be tracked down, that I was ashamed of us. They even orchestrated my absence from Grandpa's funeral, telling me it was at noon when it was actually at 9:00 a.m. They then told everyone I didn't show, that I didn't care. I would never have missed his funeral. Never. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry, thinking about all those years, all those lies. That's not true, I tried to say to Grandma later. I tried to call. I came by in March. Victoria was here. She said no one was home. But Victoria had simply been part of their long-running scheme. This wasn't distance, not really. This was erasure. They cut me off from Walter and Eleanor on purpose. They lied to them, creating a fabricated narrative of my disinterest and shame. And for a long time, it worked. The silence grew, thick and suffocating, like a phantom limb ache, until that day at the will reading. I hadn't been back to the ranch since the spring before Grandpa passed. It was strange how something so familiar, so deeply etched into my memories, could now feel so utterly foreign. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out of the car, the sound jarringly loud in the afternoon stillness. The wind chimes on the porch, once the gentle soundtrack of summer afternoons, and sun tea brewing on the windowsill, now sounded hollow, like echoes of something irrevocably lost. I hesitated before knocking, my hand hovering over the chipped white paint of the door. It was the same as always. The magnolia trees still leaned a little too far east, just as I remembered. But despite the familiarity, I didn't feel welcome. A knot tightened in my stomach. When the door creaked open, I half expected silence, an empty house, another ghost of an excuse. Instead, a sharp voice cut through the air. "So you finally decided to show up," my grandmother Eleanor said. Her voice hadn't changed, still sharp enough to cut glass, still carrying that underlying strength. Her arms were crossed, her jaw set like stone. I stood there, frozen, searching her face for anything, warmth, relief, even confusion. But there was only a chilling coldness in her eyes. My mind raced, trying to grasp what was happening. "Grandma, what's going on?" I finally managed to ask, stepping closer, my voice a little shaky. "They told me you were too busy, that you didn't want to be bothered, that you had a new life." Her voice wavered for a split second, a hint of vulnerability before hardening again. "Your grandfather called for you, Clara, every day on his deathbed. He asked for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. My throat suddenly went dry. "That's not true," I whispered, the sound barely audible. "I tried to call. I came by in March. Victoria was here. She said no one was home." Grandma's eyes narrowed, a slow burn starting to ignite deep within them. "We were here," she stated. Her voice low and steady. "We were always here." The silence that followed was long, painful, heavy with years of unspoken words and unseen wounds. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared into the house, leaving the door ajar. The air inside felt thicker, like the very walls were holding their breath. I followed her, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and a desperate hope for answers. She returned, clutching a worn leather notepad in her trembling hands. "This is the number he kept calling," she said, her voice softer now as she handed it to me. I recognized Grandpa's handwriting instantly, blocky and neat, with that familiar slight slant. But the number on the page, it wasn't mine. "Grandma, this isn't my number," I said, a cold dread seeping into my veins. "Not even close." "I've had the same one since college." She stared at the notepad, her brows knitting together in a troubled frown. "They told us you changed it," she murmured, almost to herself. "That you didn't want to be tracked down. That you were ashamed of us?" "No," I said, backing towards the wall, needing its solid support. "They lied to you. They cut me off from you on purpose." Her hands began to tremble noticeably. Slowly, as if her knees had given up entirely, she sank into the worn floral armchair beside the fireplace. "They told me the funeral was at noon," I whispered. The memory a fresh sting. I got to the church and it was empty. She looked up, her face pale, the realization dawning on her. "The funeral was at 9:00, she said softly, her voice barely audible. "They told everyone you didn't show, that you didn't care." My breath caught in my chest. A sharp, searing pain tore through me. "I would never have missed his funeral," I choked out, tears blurring my vision. Never. For a moment, the room was quiet. Too quiet. And then I felt it. Like a crack in a dam, my chest tightened, my vision blurred, and the long-suppressed grief and anger finally surged. I sank down next to her, clutching her hand like a child, seeking comfort. "I didn't know," I said, the words barely escaping my lips. "I didn't know he was even sick until it was too late." Her voice softened, her hand gently brushing mine, a silent gesture of comfort. "We know the truth now," she said. "That's what matters. We know." We sat there for a long time, the silence not awkward, but heavy, thick with everything that had been left unsaid for years. The old clock on the mantel ticked louder than I remembered. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing dry leaves across the porch like restless, forgotten memories. Finally, Grandma Eleanor stood up. Her hands still shook slightly, but there was a fire in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years, a glint of steel. "I'm calling them," she declared, her voice firm. "Calling who?" I asked, confused. She didn't answer at first. She walked to the old rotary phone on the kitchen wall, the one Grandpa Walter had always refused to replace, and began dialing. Each click of the dial felt deliberate, loaded, like punctuation to a sentence she'd waited far too long to write. I watched her fingers, thinned by age but steady with resolve. When the line connected, her voice turned cold and clipped, a tone I'd rarely heard her use. "Brenda," she said, her voice like ice. "I need you, James and Victoria too, here, now." A muffled protest came through the receiver, tinny and distant, but Grandma cut it off. "No, it can't wait. Be here in an hour." She hung up without saying goodbye. Then she turned to me, her eyes meeting mine, grim but determined. "The lawyer's on his way too," she said. "Grandpa's lawyer?" I blinked, surprised. She nodded. "Your grandfather, he left some things, instructions, but he made it clear they're to be read only with everyone present. So that's exactly what we're going to do." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just nodded, a silent agreement passing between us. For the next hour, I sat at the small kitchen table, tracing my finger along the edge of the worn wood. That table. It was the same one where Grandpa used to sip his morning coffee, lost in the scientific journals I mailed him from college. The place where he first asked about my communication studies, truly interested. The very spot where I once told him, as a hopeful, wide-eyed kid, that I wanted to study plant memory, and he hadn't laughed, not even a chuckle. I looked around the kitchen. Same floral curtains, same steady hum of the old refrigerator. But the air had changed. It felt charged, electric, with anticipation and a sense of impending reckoning. Footsteps echoed on the porch. The doorbell rang. Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder, a comforting weight. "Stay here," she instructed. "I'll call you when it's time." From the kitchen, I could hear them arrive, one by one. My mother, Brenda, her voice overly sweet, saccharine, floating in from the living room. "Oh my goodness, it smells exactly the same in here." Then my father, James, his calm, measured tone, attempting to impose order. I thought this was handled already. And finally Victoria, her voice laced with dismissive annoyance. "Seriously, this couldn't have waited until after the estate finishes processing?" Then silence, and Grandma Eleanor's voice, colder than I had ever heard it, cutting through the strained quiet. "Please sit down. Mr. Harold Finch is on his way. He'll be reading Walter's final instructions." I could imagine their faces, confused, curious, a little annoyed, perhaps even a touch smug, still believing they were in control. They didn't know I was here. They didn't know what was about to come. And neither did I, not fully. But deep down, as I'd thought at the will reading, I hoped. Just once, someone would say out loud what I'd always known in my bones, that what they did wasn't love, that their silence, their exclusion, their manipulation, they weren't misunderstandings. They were choices. The front door creaked again. I heard a new voice, steady, professional, the lawyer. "This won't take long," Mr. Finch said, "but it must be done properly." That was my cue. Grandma's voice called out firm and clear. "Clara, come in now." I stood. My heart raced, a drumbeat against my ribs, and as I stepped through the kitchen doorway into the living room, 3 heads snapped in my direction. Their eyes went wide, their carefully constructed expressions unraveling all at once. My mother's smile froze on her face, a grotesque mask. My father's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. Victoria's face paled, all the color draining from her cheeks. The air snapped like static, thick with their shock. They weren't just surprised to see me, they were terrified. All three of them just stared. My mother, Brenda, blinked rapidly, as if she'd seen a ghost, a phantom from a past they'd worked so hard to bury. My father, James, adjusted his collar, a nervous tic I hadn't seen from him in years. A tell that revealed his carefully cultivated composure was crumbling. Victoria's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. No clever retort, no dismissive sigh. She looked utterly stunned, like someone had yanked the script from her hands mid-performance, leaving her utterly lost on a stage she thought she owned. I kept my back straight, my posture deliberately unyielding. If they expected me to cower, to apologize for my presence, they would be profoundly disappointed. Grandma Eleanor, standing tall beside me, gestured to an empty armchair directly across from them. I sat down slowly, deliberately, steadying my breath, a silent act of defiance. Mr. Finch, the lawyer, gave me a quick nod, polite but unreadable, his gaze calm amid the chaos. Then he opened his worn leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "This," he began, his voice clear and resonant in the suddenly hushed room, "is the last will and testament of Walter R. Donovan, recorded and sealed per his request." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. In addition to the official documents, he has included a handwritten letter to be read aloud. No one spoke, the tension in the room almost unbearable. He cleared his throat and began. "To my wife, Eleanor Donovan," Mr. Finch read, his voice unwavering, "I leave our family ranch, the house, and sufficient funds for her comfort and care. She knows how to find the rest." Grandma Eleanor didn't even blink, her gaze fixed straight ahead, an unshakable presence. Then Mr. Finch turned the page. My heart gave a little lurch. He paused for a moment, and then, his voice cutting through the stillness, he read, "To my granddaughter, Clara Williams." The room tightened. I felt it, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. My mother's eyes darted to Victoria, a flicker of panic in their depths. I kept my hands folded in my lap, outwardly calm, but inside, a torrent of emotion swirled. Mr. Finch continued, his voice steady. "I leave the Donovan Research Annex, located at 317 Laurel Creek Road, Charleston, including all laboratory equipment, funding accounts, active research patents, and intellectual property currently filed under Donovan Innovation." A sharp gasp echoed through the room. Not mine. It was my mother, Brenda. Victoria, meanwhile, was slowly turning a ghastly shade of white. The silence that followed felt like a ticking bomb. And finally, Mr. Finch concluded, "The remainder of my estate, financial holdings, stocks, and retirement funds shall be divided equally between my two granddaughters, Clara and Victoria Williams." There it was, a bomb, quiet and elegant in its delivery, but an absolute explosive in its impact. The actual explosion came immediately after. Victoria shot to her feet, her chair scraping across the polished floor with a deafening screech. "What?" she spat, her voice cracking, raw with disbelief and fury. "He gave her the annex, the entire facility. That's insane." Her eyes, wide and wild, swung to my parents. You told me," she cried, her finger trembling as she pointed at Brenda and James. "You said it would all be mine, that if I just kept visiting him, if I smiled and played nice, that everything would come to me." My father's lips tightened into a thin, grim line, but he didn't respond. His usual composure completely shattered. My mother stared at the floor, as if it might suddenly open up and swallow her whole, desperate for an escape. I just sat there, still, watching it all unravel, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. Mr. Finch calmly raised one hand, a gesture for silence. "There is more," he announced. "Mr. Donovan also wrote a personal letter to Clara, which he requested be read aloud in this room, in front of the family." Victoria let out a bitter, disbelieving laugh, but no one joined her, the sound hollow and isolated. Grandma Eleanor, with a quiet grace, walked to a drawer beside her armchair and handed Mr. Finch a folded letter. "He wrote this the week before he died," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He made me promise." The lawyer unfolded the letter slowly, carefully, mindful not to tear the creased paper. Grandpa Walter's handwriting, broad and confident, filled the page. To my dearest Clara, Mr. Finch began reading, his voice unwavering. If this is being read, then I'm no longer by your side. But my belief in you remains stronger than ever. The words hit me like a warm wind through an open window, a gentle caress after years of cold neglect. You were always the quiet one, the observer, the thinker, he had written, the one who asked why when others didn't care to. Victoria slumped back into her chair, her face a mask of sullen resentment. Mom's fingers twisted nervously in her lap, a sign of her agitation. Dad looked out the window, avoiding everyone's gaze, as if wishing himself far away from this uncomfortable revelation. You built your own truth in a family that never learned to honor yours, Mr. Finch read on, Grandpa's words a balm to my long, aching soul. I felt something shift inside me, a profound recognition, not rage or revenge, but a deep understanding. You were never a mistake, the letter continued. You were the legacy I was proudest of. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't look away. I wanted them all to hear every single word, every single one. Mr. Finch's voice remained steady, even as the emotional weight of the words shifted the air in the room, making it heavy with unspoken history. I saw how you clutched that little notebook when you were 7, tracking how long it took raindrops to fill a glass. I saw how your face lit up when you discovered patterns, while everyone else only saw distractions. My chest tightened. I remembered that notebook. I still had it. He continued, his voice echoing Grandpa's tenderness and regret. I saw the way your joy dimmed when your mother brushed you off, the way your father changed the subject every time you shared something you were proud of. I heard my mother, Brenda, inhale sharply, a startled gasp. I didn't look at her. Victoria was easier for them, the letter stated, a brutal truth laid bare. She sparkled in all the ways they understood. But you, Clara, you glowed in ways they couldn't translate, and instead of learning your language, they shut you out. Victoria shifted in her seat, her arms folded tightly across her chest, a defensive gesture. I don't blame her entirely, Grandpa had written, his words surprisingly compassionate even for Victoria. She played the part they handed her, but you wrote your own role, and that, my girl, takes courage. A single tear rolled down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I remember the day you won your first science fair and asked me to hide the trophy, Mr. Finch read, the words conjuring a vivid, painful memory. You said maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I'm someone else's child. A low, painful exhale escaped from somewhere across the room. Maybe it was my father, James. You deserved celebration, Clara, the letter concluded, its final words a powerful testament of love. Not invisibility, and while I can't undo the damage, I can give you something that is entirely yours. A place to build freely, without apology, without their shadows. Mr. Finch paused, folding the letter slowly, deliberately. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded, thick with memory, resentment, and something new, something profound. Clarity. I cleared my throat, the small sound breaking the suffocating tension in the room. I remember that science fair, I said softly, my voice a little shaky but steadying as I spoke. Mom didn't come. She was at Victoria's dress rehearsal. Victoria flinched, a visible reaction to the truth. I came home afterward, I continued, my voice growing stronger, holding that trophy like it was some kind of sin. My father, James, finally spoke, his voice tight with desperation. Clara, this isn't the time to rehash the past. No, I snapped, my voice sharpening, cutting through his attempt to control the narrative. It's the only time, because all I ever got from either of you was, why can't you just be more like your sister? I turned my gaze directly to Victoria. And from you? Every single time I tried to be proud of something, you turned it into a threat. She scoffed, a dismissive sound, trying to regain some semblance of control. Oh, come on, you always made yourself the victim. I worked for what I got. I nodded, a cold, hard truth settling in my gut. You mean you visited Grandpa when it was convenient? I said, my voice quiet but firm. Smiled when you were told to. Said the right things because you thought it would pay off. Victoria's expression hardened, her eyes flashing with anger. And what? You think you're so pure? You disappeared for years. No, I snapped, the carefully maintained calm finally cracking. I was cut off. You told Grandma I didn't want to see her. You gave Grandpa a fake number and made sure I never got his messages. That's not distance. That's erasure. My mother, Brenda, stood up abruptly, her face flushed. Enough, Clara, you're twisting everything. This family has been through a lot. This family, Grandma Eleanor cut in sharply. Her voice like steel, her eyes blazing, has been living a lie, and I let it happen far too long. Mom turned to her, stunned. Mother, don't. I watched you all turn a blind eye to Clara's pain, Grandma continued, ignoring her daughter. I believed you when you said she didn't care. I should have known better. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly looking very small. Look, he mumbled, trying another angle. Clara got her education, her lab camps, her travel. That wasn't free. No, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It wasn't, but you didn't pay for any of it. Grandpa did. Every single cent, the scholarships he found for me, the flights, the journals. You didn't even know where I went half the time. My voice cracked with the raw emotion that finally broke through. You made me feel like a burden. He made me feel seen. Victoria stood up again, her face contorted in fury. This is ridiculous. I was told I'd get everything. I was the one who stayed. I was the good daughter. No, I said calmly, meeting her furious gaze. You were the performer, the chosen. I was the hidden one. But Grandpa didn't forget me, and now you don't get to erase me anymore. Victoria's face twisted, a sneer forming on her lips. Why should you get anything just because you're a sad little genius with a lab coat? I smiled, just slightly, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips. No, I said, my voice filled with a quiet, unyielding conviction. I get something because I earned his love honestly, and that's the one thing you never understood. Love isn't a performance. Then Grandma Eleanor stood. She walked to the center of the room, slow but unshaken, a formidable figure. She looked directly at Victoria, her gaze unwavering. I regret that Walter left you anything, she said. Her voice clear and firm. You may have played the role, but it was never love. It was a transaction. And I'm ashamed I didn't see it sooner. She turned to all of them, Brenda, James, and Victoria. Her eyes cold, dismissive. Leave, she commanded. You're not welcome here. My mother gasped, a shocked sound. Mom, please. Out, Grandma said again, her voice resonating with an authority that brooked no argument. Now. They didn't move at first, stunned into immobility. Then Victoria, her face crimson with rage, grabbed her designer bag and stormed out, her heels hitting the wood floor like gunshots. My parents followed, equally stunned, muttering about legal challenges, threats that felt hollow now. And for the first time in my life, I realized they couldn't take anything with them. The door clicked shut behind them. No slamming, no dramatic exit, just finality. I stood there for a moment, rooted in place, unsure what to feel. The room was quiet now, not tense, not explosive, just free. Grandma Eleanor walked past me and sat down slowly on the sofa, her posture still regal despite the events. Her hands, which had trembled moments earlier, now rested calmly in her lap. They'll come back, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, the old patterns of expectation ingrained deep within me. They always do. Maybe, she replied, her eyes meeting mine, a quiet understanding passing between us. But this time, we don't have to let them in. It took a while for that to truly sink in. For so long, I had operated on that silent contract, the one where I believed if I proved myself enough, if I achieved enough, if I stayed useful, maybe they would finally call me daughter, sister, family without flinching. But standing in that room, with the echo of my grandfather's words still hanging in the air, I realized something painfully simple, something that finally set me free. I had been trying to earn love from people who never had any to give. And Grandpa Walter, he'd seen that long before I did. I think I need air, I said, feeling a sudden need for open space, for a chance to breathe freely. Grandma nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and I stepped outside onto the back porch. The old boards creaked under my feet, a sound that once meant home, but now it meant change. The magnolia trees were still blooming in the corner, their white petals a stark contrast against the green leaves. Beyond the fence stretched the same red dirt field where Grandpa once let me build my first greenhouse as a kid. It had collapsed after 2 weeks, a hilariously flimsy structure, but he had called it a perfect disaster, and we'd laughed about it for years. I thought of that girl, 10 years old, knees dirty, eyes bright with dreams, and I wondered how long she had been buried under expectations that weren't her own. When I came back inside, Grandma Eleanor had placed a kettle on the stove. She moved slowly now, with the gentle caution of age, but her actions were deliberate, infused with purpose. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "Walter started planning that research annex 5 years ago, before he even got sick." I looked at her, startled. I hadn't known. "He told me he wanted you to have a space that didn't require permission to be yourself." I felt the tears then, a slow, gentle welling up, quiet and clean. No shaking, no wrenching sobs, just release. That night, for the first time in years, I stayed in my old room. The wallpaper was faded, the mattress a little too soft, but the ceiling still had those glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa helped me stick up when I was 9. I'd made him arrange them in scientifically accurate constellations. He hadn't even questioned it. As I lay there, bathed in the faint green glow of the plastic stars, I realized something else. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt reclaimed. The next morning, I brewed coffee for both of us and brought it to the kitchen table, the same one I used to avoid when my parents visited. Grandma folded the newspaper, its crisp rustle the only sound, and gave me a tired but warm smile. "So what now?" she asked, her gaze gentle. "I think I go see it," I said. "The annex, the lab." She nodded, a knowing glint in her eyes. "He'd like that," she replied. I looked out the window. The sunlight broke gently across the magnolia branches, casting dappled patterns on the porch. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to run, or prove myself, or explain anything. I didn't feel invisible, and that, more than any money, more than any inheritance, was the first real gift I had ever received from this family. The one person who believed in me had left behind something greater than a legacy. He left me permission to begin again. The first time I saw the Donovan Research Annex, it didn't look like a laboratory. It looked like a converted barn. And that's exactly what it was. Nestled at the far end of a dusty road off Laurel Creek, the building had wide, sturdy beams, a tin roof, and a pair of double doors that looked like they belonged on a horse stable, not a cutting-edge research facility. But inside was magic. The space had been completely renovated, transformed from its rustic exterior. Glass panels lined the entire east wall, allowing in full morning light, bathing the interior in a warm, scientific glow. Tables were neatly arranged with untouched lab equipment, gleaming and ready, microscopes, centrifuges, data tablets, and even a 3D printer still wrapped in plastic, its promise waiting to be unleashed. Shelves held unopened boxes, each labeled meticulously with my name. In the very center of the room, bathed in the morning light, stood a workbench, and on top of it, resting gently as if placed there just for me, was my childhood notebook. The one I thought I'd lost in college, the one with its torn pages, messy handwriting, and tiny, earnest diagrams of honeybee communication systems. My knees almost gave out beneath me, the wave of emotion so profound. It wasn't just a lab. Grandpa hadn't just built me a facility. He had built me a home for my mind. Over the next few weeks, I moved into the annex full-time. I recruited 2 graduate students, Tara and Micah, friends from my university program, who shared the same stubborn, often ridiculed, hope that science could still be human, that it could still solve real-world problems for real people. We started small. Our first success was a local grant for micro-irrigation research, focusing on sustainable water use for small farms. Then we secured a partnership with a regional farming co-op to test sustainable crop rotations, trying to help them improve soil health and yield. We made mistakes, more than I can count. We burned out equipment, often in spectacular fashion. We cried over rejected grant proposals, the sting of no still sharp even when expected. We wrestled with broken data models, staring at screens filled with unintelligible numbers late into the night. And yet we kept showing up every single day. I unlocked the doors to a place that didn't ask me to explain myself. A place where ideas weren't ridiculed, they were just tested. A place where being too intense, or too quiet, or too smart wasn't something to apologize for. It was a sanctuary, a laboratory, and a haven all rolled into one. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal funding rejection, the kind that makes you question everything you're doing, I found myself alone in the annex. The others had gone home, the lights were dimmed, and I sat on the floor by the storage closet, surrounded by printouts of failed experiments and empty coffee cups, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the old refrigerator. I reached into my bag and pulled out Grandpa's letter, the one I'd asked Mr. Finch to let me keep. I unfolded it, the creases familiar under my fingers, and found the line I'd read 100 times already. "You wrote your own role." I whispered it into the quiet room, letting the words resonate. It wasn't just encouragement anymore. It was an instruction. That night, something shifted again. I wrote a new proposal, but this time, it wasn't for another irrigation system or a new crop rotation. It was for a youth science program, based in rural schools. A program for the kids like I used to be, quiet, curious, often overlooked. We called it the Little Scientist Initiative. Our first year, we worked with just 12 students. They came from towns where schools still used outdated textbooks, where no one had ever brought a microscope to class, where the idea of a science career felt as distant as the moon. We gave each child a leather-bound notebook, a replica of my own, with Grandpa's words stamped on the first page. "Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will." It was a small act, but it felt monumental. That fall, a shy girl named Amber, barely 13, her hair always in her face, showed me pages of bee behavior observations she'd done entirely on her own. Her calculations were clumsy, her grammar was wild, but her mind was brilliant. When I told her she was brilliant, she stared at me like I'd handed her a planet, her eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. "You actually read it?" she whispered, as if the very idea was unfathomable. I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. Of course I did. And in that moment, I understood everything. This wasn't about replacing what I'd lost or seeking revenge. It was about planting something new, something vital, in better soil, and letting it grow without fear. It was about building a future, not just reclaiming a past. The email came 3 years after the will reading. It was from a lawyer, not Mr. Finch, but someone representing Victoria Williams. The subject line was short, concise. "Request for visit, Clara Williams, Donovan Innovation Annex." At first, my stomach tightened, and I braced myself for legal trouble. I assumed it was another attempt to challenge the will, to reopen some old clause, or to stir up some version of the past we'd already buried, to continue the cycle of manipulation. But when Victoria arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer heels, the perfectly coiffed hair, the meticulously applied makeup. She wore a plain navy coat, a little too big for her shoulders, as if she was trying to disappear into it. She walked into the main lobby slowly, tentatively, like she didn't want to take up space. A stark contrast to the Victoria I remembered. I stood beside Grandpa's portrait above the reception desk, a silent guardian. She paused when she saw it, her gaze lingering on his painted smile. "He always knew who you were," she said quietly, her voice tinged with something I hadn't heard before, vulnerability. Even when I didn't, especially when I didn't. For a second, I didn't know how to respond. The sentiment so unexpected. So I just nodded, a silent acknowledgement. "I'd like to see it," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. "The lab, the work, what you've done with it." I could have said no. I could have turned her away, closed the door on her like they had done to me for so many years. But I didn't. I gave her the tour. She walked beside me through the greenhouse complexes, the crop development rooms, the student display wall adorned with photos from our Little Scientist Initiative. She didn't talk much, just asked simple, honest questions. "How do you fund all this? What's this device for? Do the kids get to publish their results?" Her questions were genuine, devoid of the usual snark or dismissal. When we reached the community garden, a vibrant space where local families grew food using our sustainable methods, a testament to practical science, she stopped walking. Children were harvesting lettuce, their laughter echoing in the afternoon sun. A mother and son laughed near the compost bins, their hands dirty, their faces bright. A father tested soil moisture with one of our field kits, his brow furrowed in concentration. Victoria turned to me, her eyes filled with a raw emotion I hadn't seen in her since childhood. Her voice broke as she spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me." I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air, letting them resonate. "I just wanted to see what he built for you, and what you built with it." She didn't cry, but her hands wouldn't stop moving, tugging at her sleeves, tracing invisible circles on the railing, a restless energy that spoke volumes. I let her stay as long as she wanted. No lectures, no retaliation, no dredging up old grievances. Just truth, unspoken but present. We don't talk often, not in the way other sisters do. But twice a year now, Victoria volunteers for the youth science camp. She helps students with presentation skills, how to explain complicated data in plain English, how to stand with confidence in front of an audience, how to own their ideas. The kids surprisingly love her. Some even call her Coach V. At the end of her first summer volunteering, she handed me a folder, her demeanor almost embarrassed. "I wrote a communication guide for the shy kids," she said, looking away slightly. "Thought it might help." I opened it later that night. It wasn't perfect, not grammatically flawless, but it was thoughtful. It was gentle. It was real. And for the first time in my life, I saw a version of my sister that didn't scare me. She never apologized with words, not directly. But she shows up. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. We're not sisters the way other people mean it. But in this tiny corner of a world Grandpa Walter dreamed up, a world of science and honest connection, we've stopped pretending. And somehow, that's the beginning of something true. It's been 6 years since that will reading. 6 years since the front door slammed shut behind my parents, Brenda and James, and Victoria, their footsteps echoing down the porch like the end of a performance no one applauded for. I haven't spoken to my parents since. Sometimes their names appear in emails I don't open, in charity press releases, or financial articles from Florida where they retired early. I don't hate them, not anymore. But I don't miss them either. What I do think about is the work. The Donovan Research Annex has grown into something beyond my wildest imagination. What started as one converted barn is now a full research campus, 4 labs, 3 greenhouses, and over 60 acres of trial fields. We've developed drought-resistant seed varieties that now feed thousands in parts of the South, where traditional crops consistently fail, bringing genuine hope to communities. We've partnered with universities from Kenya to Brazil, sharing our findings in regenerative agriculture, helping to heal the land and feed more people globally. And just last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco, accepting a national grant for climate innovation. The lights were bright, shining down, but I didn't flinch. I wore a navy blue suit, sharp and professional, and Grandpa's pocket watch, tucked inside the breast pocket, the one Grandma Eleanor gave me last year, with his initials barely faded on the back. Inside the lid, a tiny photo of me, a 10-year-old, standing proudly next to my honeybee communication display, grinning from ear to ear. He carried it with him every day, Grandma had said. Now it sits on my desk at the annex, right where the morning light hits it, and casts small circles of brightness over my research notes. Some days I talk to him, not with words, not out loud, just in the quiet moments, when an experiment fails and I need a steadying thought, when a kid from the program wins a scholarship and I feel that surge of pride, when I remember how close I came to truly believing I didn't matter, that I was a burden, that I was invisible. He never let me disappear. Not really, and now I understand why. Legacy isn't a monument, something solid and unmoving. It's a map. One built from choices and kindness and tiny anchors left behind for someone to follow when the world tries to erase them. These days, Grandma Eleanor lives in a small apartment connected to my house in town. She's slower now, a little more forgetful, but still sharper than anyone else I know when it counts. We drink coffee every morning in the sunroom, the warm light bathing us as we talk. She tells me stories about Grandpa Walter I've never heard, how he once planted an entire tree just to propose to her, how he believed soil could remember kindness, that good intentions could literally grow, and how he always knew I would come back. Knew that deep down, I was tied to this place, to him. And maybe he was right. Maybe I had to leave, to be pushed away, to truly understand what coming back would mean. Some evenings, I walked to the far end of the annex fields, past the rows of solar irrigation test beds, and the vibrant kids' garden plots, to the old wooden bench Grandpa built by hand. From there, I can see the stars. Real ones, vast and impossibly distant, Not the glow-in-the-dark kind I stuck on my bedroom ceiling as a child. But they still make me think of that girl I once was. The one who kept asking why, even when no one cared to answer. The one who refused to be quiet. The one he believed in. And on nights like that, when the wind moves just right through the trees, rustling the leaves with a gentle whisper, I swear I can hear his voice in the rustling leaves. Write the things they don't understand. One day, the world will. And now, finally, it does. If you've ever felt overlooked, like you don't quite fit in, or like your light is dimmed by someone else's expectations, know this: your truth matters. Keep asking why. Keep building your own path. Because sometimes the greatest gifts, the real legacies, aren't what you're handed, but what you find, or even what you build, when you stop trying to earn something that was never yours to begin with. Thanks for listening. If this resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below. What's a moment in your life where you found your own truth in unexpected ways? I'd love to hear your stories.